Tēnā koutou katoa. It is just going on 2 o'clock, so we'll get underway with our annual plan workshop. This is the first workshop that we have this year, and shortly we will be going out for consultation. So before we get started, I would just like to open us up with a brief karakia. Tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kia tauai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai here. Just a reminder, everybody, this is being live streamed. This is available to our public, and we also welcome our staff who are here. Mobile phones, please have them on silent, and depending how we go, we may be finished by 3, but we'll certainly wrap this up by 3:30. Just a reminder that what we are about to discuss today is not the final decision. There will still be consultation underway, and while we will see where figures are initially sitting, also just a reminder that there is still work to go, and councillors still have the opportunity to provide feedback before we make a decision on the final annual plan to go out for consultation. So without further ado, I will hand over to David and Thomas, who can take us through the slides, and we'll let them go through the slides, and then if you could just take a pause, Thomas, when you're ready for questions, and we'll jump in then. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon again, councillors. Considering the time constraints, I will go fairly quickly through some of the stuff that we've covered before, but we'll spend a little bit more time on where particularly we need the direction from you as we progress towards finalising a draft plan to consult on. So just a reminder of where we are in the time frame. We had a number of workshops, obviously pre-Christmas, where we navigated a number of topics, went away over the Christmas period with the team, and have come back with regards to from a financial perspective, a draft plan with a bit of a number, which we'll talk about shortly. We're needing to just confirm up and flesh out some of the consultation topics and where your preferred options kind of sit going forward. And then going forward, we'll look to finalise a consultation document to go out for consultation in April and seek the community feedback on the proposals. I think it is a little bit of a friendly reminder of where we have come from with regards to the long-term plan context. We are in year 2 of the current long-term plan. We are only 7 months after the adoption of our long-term plan. I think if you were to rewind the highlight videos of where I was presenting on your behalf on the LTP, we started talking about how it was probably it was a period of uncertainty. It was a really difficult time to put an LTP together on the back of high inflationary environment, interest rates, annual inflation tracking well over 6, and that was at the time, and I think it peaked closer to 8. And so it was a difficult LTP to put together, and in particular around with all those cost pressures around trying to balance that to ensure that the LTP itself also was tied to your priority and delivered on the things that were important for yourselves and the community, and focused on those. And there's just a little bit of a slide to remind you of what those priorities were. And out of that, we did develop a financial strategy that kind of really did focus on predominantly those priorities. So it was around maintaining our existing infrastructure, making sure that it was fit for purpose and that we were looking after it, that we were providing infrastructure that was accommodating growth, and we were doing it at the right time in the right places, ensuring that the future for our district was bright. So there was a little bit of recognition that around some of those community outcomes around housing and safety in particular, and there was a strong focus around community safety on the back of the post-COVID years that we had, being good stewards for our assets and balancing all of that with affordability. And that where we were borrowing, we were only borrowing to support infrastructure, and in particular around significant capital projects such as the wastewater treatment plant or sewage scheme expansions and growth, expecting the development contributions to come in later when that growth occurred, and fund those projects into the longer term. So skip ahead. So I guess I'll come back, no, skip ahead again, sorry. Bit of a recap of where we were. We navigated a number of topics. I think it came to a public workshop pre-Christmas where we started talking about some of the pressures that we faced and also some of the opportunities. And what was highlighted at that time was an opportunity to talk about the Tarawera sewage scheme, and we just did discuss a methodology around what some potential funding options could be, but also a process with regards to encouraging the residents to sign up and agree to the scheme. And that is one of the topics later on today that we'll be seeking your guidance on. We had a good discussion around affordability. I think it's recognising that when the LTP was put in place, we came out of that very high inflationary, we were in the midst of the high inflationary period, but things felt good. And probably at the moment, with regards to where the world is in particular and the economy, that things maybe aren't as well as they were back then. We also were targeting a lift and shift of year 2 of the LTP, tweaking and fixing the things that we knew we had to fix, but predominantly sticking with the underlying themes of the LTP, your priorities and what we were looking to deliver in that year. And as I said, just making some final changes. So as a reminder, year 2 in the LTP was 9.8. And within that, we did talk about coming up to now and the months before Christmas. We'd done a number of things that were actually different from the LTP. So we brought the Infracore business back in-house, and so that's now our internal works department. We moved events and venues out of council and moved that to Rotorua NZ. We saw significant asset revaluations once again at the end of the last financial year, which had a flow-on effect to our asset values and depreciation and our renewals. And we also brought forward some capex that we had in the years, I think 3, 4, 5 of the LTP and moving it forward into year 1. And that would be offset as well with lower inflation from what we had in our underlying assumption in the LTP. We also saw interest rates, particularly just before Christmas, go lower faster than anticipated. So reflecting that, you've made a previous decision around deferring FOGO, and so the cost and the rates revenue to support that has been deferred out from year 2 to future years. Some minor level of service changes, and we also had a look at some of the items that we'd deferred from year 1 and year 2 to get the year 1 increase down, and had a look at what one of those could continue to be deferred or what needed to come in. And as a result of that is this, and so I guess spending a little bit of time to just explain this. This is the wonderful waterfall graph that we've talked about before. On the left is the big green bar, and that 9.8 reflects the proposed rate increase in year 2 of our long-term plan. And so as we walk along, we'll talk about how it goes up and down and where we ended up towards the end with regards to the draft that we're proposing. So you'll see there at the top of the screen, it does say 8.1. And so one of the first things we did was within the year 2, we had a $1 million efficiency target put in. So we just removed that to see what the impact would be and kind of get back to a baseline. We then looked at the decision around deferring FOGO. So by deferring FOGO, some of the costs and service delivery costs also came out of year 2 and moved to year 1. And so that pulled the rates back down 0.6%. David and the team working with PwC also looked at where our current interest rates were, where the underlying assumptions in the LTP were, and even though we anticipated a decrease in long-term interest rates across the life of the plan, what we did see, particularly just before Christmas, was a quite rapid decline with the Reserve Bank reducing. That was on the back of particularly what was opening overseas, and our interest costs are predominantly from overseas, and particularly in the American 10-year bond market, and so we were seeing that as well, and so we were able to put a lower forecast cost on that, and that overall brought the proposed rates increase down 1% overall. On top of that, underlying inflation. So we've always used Bill with regards to the economists, and they provide us with our inflation factors across a range of our activities, and comparing where their pre-Christmas assessment was of where they see it going where it is and where they see it going, we were able to also reduce the underpinning inflation number in year 2 of the LTP, so they brought it back down another further 2.3. We had a look at some of the deferrals and what could be deferred. We felt that a good portion of them did have to come in, and so there was a little bit that was continued to be deferred. And so that got us to a lower point, and then we looked at the things that were putting pressure on us. So we were seeing significant amount of increased depreciation expense, and so the need to fund that. And we've always talked about the need to fund our renewals, which is from funding depreciation, and the need to stay on top of that and not fall behind. And so while the plan itself in year 2 already had a component of additional depreciation funding, with the pressure that we're seeing on the cost of delivery, we've suggested funding a good portion of that new depreciation that's come in. Infracore, so within the plan, we'd also already planned a inflationary increase and some additional costs, and we'll recall the discussion that from the SOI that came from the board with regards to the request that they felt they needed, and kind of reviewing that. We have put in an additional amount on top of what's already in the plan, and I'll go into a little bit more detail as to what the likely implications might be with that and the risk that comes with that. The de-risking of the events and venues activity, as we recall, by moving it out of council to a CCO, that revenue shortfall that's currently there, we're just cash flowing that and providing that de-risking. And then what we've done is we've put the $1 million efficiency saving back in and tying it to some of the initiatives that the organisation is working towards, which we'll go into detail probably at the next workshop around how those elements will be delivered, and there's a range of things there. Now, none of these trigger a need to consult or a change in a level of service. These are all internal things that the organisation has identified as a minor impact, but delivering on that opportunity. And it's a combination of some cost savings, doing things different, and even at times looking at some of our fees and charges and tweaking them. But we can go into a little bit more detail on that.
Just hang on a second, Thomas, before you go further forward. Just want to probably explain what's coming up soon, which is a lot of the work that we have done is to rationalise that Infracore number down. So the last time we met here, it was a confidential workshop, but you would have seen a much larger amount for Infracore, largely based on the advice we had got from the board going into that annual plan. And at that stage, because we'd just brought Infracore back in-house, we didn't have the ability to understand exactly what those numbers were. And so most of the reduction that you're seeing now is from the work the team have done to rationalise and understand that, which we'll go through in a bit more detail coming up. But basically it's taking that from 2.1 up to 0.6 is doing a lot of the work from the numbers that you saw previously.
Cool. What I'll do is I'm just going to go through the next 3 slides, and then we'll come back to this one and pause for any questions that you may have. So I think I've covered this one off already, and so within the 8.1, I think we need to point out that there's some risk there, and so in particular, I think as the Chief Executive just mentioned, there is a level of service level gap with regards to bringing the Infracore functions back in-house, and there are some known gaps that we've accepted, and there's some risks associated with that, which I'll flesh out in a little bit more detail. And in particular around open spaces, that's around plant and equipment of that ex-CCO's equipment, some of the gardens, and in particular the janitorial maybe not being at the level that we expect. The reactive response to some of our water leaks, in particular that team around the staffing levels and so forth, are some of the things that we need to rectify or accept where those current levels of service are. One of the other things coming up is the parking contract renewal. And so we're 18 months away from that, and we'll probably in the fiscal year that this lands, we'll be going to the council after the election around any new or proposed parking contract, whether it's renewed or goes out to market, and then if it does go out to market, then that will land in this fiscal year. So the unknown of where that lands and what that looks like at the moment, it will likely be different to how we've got. There's also the Aquatic Centre renewal that's, I think, partly underway in discussions as well with regards to the renewal of the CLM contract for our aquatics facility. Local water's done well. You know, Stavros and the team are putting that plan together for the DIA's approval in the first week of September, and one of the consultation topics as we go out will also be on the options of the DIA, but a little bit unknown around where that lands, whether there'll be extra regulatory costs that are put on us as an organisation and what that looks like, and so there is, you know, uncertainty around that going forward. RMA reform, so the government is in the process of changing that. There is a risk when talking to JP around whether some of the reforms will force us to have to do plan changes. And as you know, plan changes come at quite substantial cost. And so while we've got budgets that we're not anticipating any significant plan changes, that if something does fall out and we have to respond, that could put us under financial pressure as well. And then the challenges of you know, building services, regulatory and animal control. We know that we're always after more staff, and we know we can always do more and put more effort into resource and in that, and so there's an acceptance therefore that as pressure continues to increase in those areas and we don't respond with extra support services, that might be a gap there that the community expects not to be there. And so those are just, I guess, some of the high level risks. Just kind of teasing out some of the ex-Infracore risks, and this is not not designed to be a judgment or anything. It's just some of the things that we've noticed that we've sort of accepted over the years, but we know now that where we would like it to be. And so, you know, the gardens in particular around the level of service. While the team do a really good job, we also know that more can go into that, and that there is probably a gap there with regards to where we'd like it to be, and they're doing the best job that's possible. But Rob and the team, you know, there is a little bit of an expectation gap there. The mowing itself, we don't have the same issues of mowing that we had a couple of previous years ago, but we do know that so some of those levels of services in some places were reduced as a result of both staffing and resourcing, and it's something that we've accepted now, but is that actually something that the community and yourselves accept? And so there is a delta there that we could look to fix as well if you wanted, but it is currently there. Janitorial, we do have a lot of public evolution blocks for our district. It is one of those challenges around the frequency of cleaning and all the rest, and so Rob and the team believe that there is a little bit of a delta there with regards to where we expect it to be, and so this is something that it's been the level of service for some time, and so just recognising that we can move up. And I think coming back to what we talked about before around the board's expectations of funding going forward and that gap, these are the sorts of things that will be closed by that gap. And then cemeteries as well, around some admin and some support in that area, and staffing and invoicing and those sorts of elements. So these are, by us putting our foot forward with regards to 8.1, highlighting the risks, some opportunities. These are some of the underlying service level gaps that we know that we've got that need to be worked on. So with that, I'm happy to just pause there and answer any questions that you may have up to now.
Thank you. I'll get started. Just regarding the admin sort of services, and in particular the cemeteries where it says 70% below level of service delivery, are there any things that we're able to look at that may currently be done in person that could easily be automated, not only for efficiency purposes but to improve and speed up the process for our customer?
100%. I think this is the opportunity that we're now month 3 of having brought Infracore back in-house, and still quite a bit of work to do. The first period was obviously around stabilisation, and now there's that opportunity to understand how some of those business processes can be automated and more fully integrated. So, and that's the work and the opportunities that's in front of us over the next pretty much 6 months. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura, and for you. Thank you, Thomas. Could I just clarify something in regards to Infracore, please? When you say an area where they weren't delivering the service level that we required, or we're paying for, so were they charging us for work they weren't doing, or they just weren't providing that level of service, so we weren't paying them? So, sorry, if they were supposed to mow a thing twice a month, and we're only doing it once, we were only paying them once though, weren't we? Or were we part of the contract actually paying for two?
So a lot of the revenue that they gave was a fixed amount, and so tied to that was the service levels. And what we would have seen over the last 10 plus years, this was even back in the Castle Corp days, some of these gaps probably still existed. We were paying for a certain level of service and was falling short. And over the years, I think that gap has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as we've put, not only ourselves, the parent organisation, under financial constraint and those sorts of things, and looking after replacing assets, but their organisation as well. So that's, where we pay for widgets on a widget by widget basis, no, we haven't been paying them for things that, or hadn't been paying for things that they weren't doing. So but there were cases, yes, like the mowing, where we expected it to be a certain length and frequency, and because of financial pressures and cost constraints over time, those standards the gap has widened. Yeah.
Okay, could I just ask, just one quick follow-up. So, so from that, are you able in a position yet to sort of say, like, were we sort of overpaying sort of 10% more than we should have? Do you think you'll be able to give us a figure at some point, or we should just chalk it down to, hey, we've moved on?
No, I'm not, and I think the opportunity more is now that they're in-house and we're about to particularly accelerate the vertical integration into our organisation, actually working much closer together, alignment, and being really clear on what we are getting in and delivering, and then where there are known gaps, coming back and talking to you around what those impacts are and what we could do going forward.
And could I just ask, so moving forward at some point, will you be able to be in a position, say a department head of, say, parks, for example, how will we make sure that those issues don't continue in the thing? Like, are we going to ask them to take a photo of before and after, and that's going to be sent through and recorded through one council, or somehow, just to try and make sure that the mistakes that have happened previously are addressed and, try to be eliminated?
Yep, so that is the leveraging of that technology. Part of it is actually, when you're a contract service buyer, making sure that you have the systems and processes in play with regards to making sure that they are delivering and measuring and monitoring. It's a bit different, I think, when they're in-house and they are now us. And so what are those systems and processes that we have? And in a way, it's kind of tied to one of the targets that Chief Executive has given us around the whole organisation. How do we demonstrate that we're actually delivering and performing on the things that we say we have? And so open spaces is sort of the same. And so what we've recognised by bringing Infracore in, the systems and processes they had were really good with regards to the water services around tracking and monitoring and performance, because they were all mandatory measures we had to report on, and the auditors went through all of it, and not so much in that open spaces. And so Rob and the team, working with the new team coming in, identifying what those performance measures are, how we're reporting that performance, but also understanding the work that we do and responding to the priorities and those sorts of things going forward.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Thank you, Te Manakura.
To your questions, Councillor O'Brien, forget the word you used, but I think a better way to look at it, rather than they weren't doing what we were paying them, what we were expecting, was they were doing what we were paying them for, and over time the price of that got so high and we weren't making up the price difference by increasing our payments to them, was the feedback that the board was giving us. And that's where the board's comment around the delta required to just match the levels of service we were supposed to be getting came from. So rather than, so in effect what we're looking to do through this process to say, look, that just hadn't been done, and rather than close the gap, because close the gap means increasing rates. It would be to recognise where we're at, and if council's comfortable to say, well, what we've been getting for the last year or so is okay, then bake that in and accept it, and that's how we get from that 2.1% to down to the 0.6. Not sure if that helps.
Appear to be no further questions. Just one more quick one. Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Wadu. Councillor Brown.
These are two sensitive questions, and we don't have to answer them in public, maybe, I'm not sure. What are we budgeting for staff salary increases in this?
5.
5? Yep. How do we justify 5?
Clinton, the HR team, does engage with an external party, and I think as we get closer to the end of this financial year, time to adoption, it will be revised. However, in saying that, you might recall during our long-term plan discussions, we did put 5 across the board, because the 5% doesn't actually reflect that that's what the staff will get, but does provide the organisation flexibility to respond, like with salary budget, like we need more regulatory staff or we need more animal control staff. So it does provide that little bit of flexibility as well.
I just might also add one thing, that the starting point is what was adopted in the long-term plan. So we're not doing a build-up, we're not doing a mini long-term plan. So the brief was take the long-term plan and go up and down from there. There'll be an opportunity to talk about some more targeted measures in the last column when we go into our next workshop. But I think generally what, as Thomas has outlined, is what we've done. We've taken what was in the long-term plan and then adjusted up and down from there.
Are we just asking questions or just questions? Or do you want some commentary?
Would you prefer comments now or at the end?
I'm happy to receive them now.
Yeah, yeah,
Commentary?
we can take them.
So when we, one of the, I think it was the first annual plan that we sat down to, we were offered a 0% increase for staff, and I advocated for, some of you guys will recall this, I'm sure, 5. And that was off the back of some catching up, high inflation, trying to, you know, look after our team. I feel that now that inflation has come down, we're, you know, and you've highlighted that here, minimum pay rates are minimal this year, that is recommended by the government. That's an area that we could have a think about. The second, for valid reasons, it's not because I'm Councillor Grinch. The other one is community safety. I feel like we've made good inroads into that area, and I don't know what the budget is for that, specifically that area, but maybe we could dial that back a little bit to try and achieve better than 8.1. Those are two areas that I think we could have a look at. That's me.
Yep. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. We've got Councillor Barker, Wadu, and then Patterson.
Actually, that's fine. We worship. Oh, you can move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wadu.
Kia ora, e te manukura. Yeah, I think Councillor Brown already went over the question I was going to ask around staff and things like that. But I do want to make a comment, you know, especially around the janitorial services. You know, that's a 40% below level of service. It doesn't quite, it's not quite doing it for me. I think 2 cleans a day, and then it'd be reduced to one clean a day, and all the in barbecue areas and all that. I just want to ask, is there any thinking going on around how we can still have that look, feel fresh, you know, keep it clean? Because I think, you know, got to, me ma te papa, got to keep things clean and tidy and maintained. But are there any innovative ways that, well, certainly in your team, Andrew, or even your team, Thomas, around how we still maintain that kind of thing, but still save at the same time. I know that's a hard one, but that one in particular is sort of, that's real low.
I think let's take that as a comment. I don't think we have an answer for that now, but we'll take that as a comment.
Yeah, you can do some thinking around that, please.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask these questions now, but I'll take my opportunity. I've been through this twice now, and I don't see the plans for our community halls included as possible expenditure. We know that we've got some big bills to swallow, I guess you could say. I know that was planned under current budgets. Like, I can't see it here. And the other one that I had a question on was new revenue. What new revenue opportunities have we looked at? I know I was not available for the hui that we had, the private one, but I did send my suggestions through regarding the lost revenue that we get from the Freedom Campers, which I believe Deputy Mayor Kai Fong touched on earlier this morning. Is there any work looking at how we can potentially mine some of that money that we're currently not getting? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Without going into the specifics of that, which maybe Thomas or David could answer, I'd just point out that the brief was to not do things that required significant public consultation. 7 months after we'd done an extensive public consultation on a long-term plan and adopted it, the direction was we're not making big changes to parking policies or other changes in revenue and financing that would trigger a broad-scale engagement. So that's just the scene-setting comment, but I don't know if any of your specific questions maybe the team can answer about whether they would need that or not.
From memory, I think we answered some of those in a previous workshop around those opportunities. I might just have to revisit those and flick them back to you. I know that the organisation does pursue some of those. Maybe they're not as visible as can be. So as an example, an initiative with Red Stag at the moment around actually opening up camping at Waipa and working with them on, and that, so creating more opportunities for people. So there are some of those initiatives, but maybe they're just not as visible as they can be that we can show you at the moment. But something for us to see if we can get some info for you.
And Councillor Kai Fong.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just checking, are we just taking general comments around what we've been presented with thus far, or are we going to take comments at the end around the direction that the CE is seeking? Because I'll hold my
both. Yeah, so if you want to raise some comments on the particular items that are presented to us, then we will do that through the process. And then at the end, there is also a slide and opportunity to give direction that the staff are seeking, and from that, a formal paper will be brought to council at the end of February for adoption.
Okay, well,
and we have one more annual plan workshop on the 17th off the top of my head. Okay,
so if that's appropriate, then I'll just make some comments now. So I have a level of uncomfortableness with what's been presented thus far. I'm not comfortable with an 8.1. I know that this is year 2 of the LTP, but we've been given some very clear messages from the government around sticking to core services. I'm not sure that we've gone hard enough and far enough in looking at potential changes in the way in which we deliver things, more efficiencies. Do we still need to deliver things? And so I know that you don't want to go out for public consultation, but I think if the public was given the opportunity to go, you're going to have a 8% and that's what it is, but we potentially could have, a 6% if we find some other efficiencies, or a 7% if we find some other efficiencies. It might be that we still do, let's take the topic of education. We had a big debate around museum education, rubbish education, driver education. We could still do it, but do we have to do it in exactly the same format? Could we, do less of it, still do it, but we could be more efficient with the funding that we're actually spending on these sorts of things? And I don't see in any of the stuff that's been presented that we've gone hard enough and far enough in looking for those efficiencies and those savings. And I know that we put $1 million efficiency saving into the LTP, but I think that things have moved significantly since we had the consultation on the LTP, and things have changed significantly with the economy. So whilst inflation has come down and supposedly mortgage interest rates have come down, things are still really hurting for the community, and I think it is going to be a pretty hard sell to go out to them with still saying that you're still going to get another 8%, and I know we've still got a discussion coming around Tarawera and the impact that that may have, so I just would like a harder look at levels of service, efficiencies, and the way in which we're doing things, because I'm certainly not comfortable at an 8.1, and I just put that out there now. I'm sure if others are comfortable with it, that's fine then, but I've said my piece now, so I'll just put that comment out there for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kaifong. It's certainly a direction that most, if not all, councillors have given. We are wanting to do our best for the local community, but of course what we've currently been presented is also based on the previous long-term plan. Any changes above and beyond what is being presented to us today is very likely to require public consultation once again, which is of course an opportunity and a decision that's available to us to make. So we'll carry on with the slides, and again there will be an opportunity by the end of this for all councillors to provide their direction or their feedback on it.
So what I'll just do is just go into a little bit more detail of the annual plan. Probably skip through this fairly quickly, and if the councillors have any detailed specific questions, more than happy to, if we can't answer it now, to email you back another day. So within the plan itself, so overall rates revenue will be about 160 million. Of that 8.1% average increase. Targeted rates make up a 7% increase, with the general rate 11. So what that means is that it won't land evenly as 8.1 average across the board. There'll be a little bit of a range. Residential will likely be close to that percentage, whereas properties that predominantly pick up general rate, such as rural properties, will likely be therefore above that 8.1 average and closer to the number that we're suggesting is showing there. I'm just giving you a glimpse of how those operating revenues are made up and the capital works program. So again, it's a large capital works program and a continuation of finishing some of the things that are currently underway, particularly the museum, the IAF, the sewage schemes, wastewater treatment plant upgrade and growth. So that makes up, by and far the largest component of our capital works program, and by the end of year 2 we'll be fairly well completed, and then we'll start seeing our capital works program dropping from the levels that we've had not only this year but are proposing to have next year. And that capital works program as well is supported by a significant level of capital subsidies. An element of it there is from NZTA roading, but by and far the largest contributor to those capital subsidies is the government, with the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund supporting the stormwater program. Just providing you a summary of renewals. We've just filtered it highest to lowest for you to kind of get a feel of where the money is going and what we're doing. So no real surprise. The ones at the top are all our big infrastructure activities, roading, wastewater, water supplies. So again, we've taken and adjusted, if we need be, from the LTP, but not looking to significantly increase or decrease that from the levels that have been indicated in the long-term plan. Levels of service is the next big contributor, so that's $65 million in total. So this is where we see the types of things like the museum seismic strengthening, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, refurbishment of the pensioner housing, and those sorts of elements. So whereas the renewals was looking after and maintaining our existing network and infrastructure, this is growing, enhancing it in a response to challenges in our community needs. And then growth, which is, again, extension of our infrastructure, but targeted a bit different from level of service because it is predominantly driven purely from growth, and growth pays for growth, with a good portion of this being funded by temporarily loans, and then as that development occurs and development contributions come in, look to fund those into the longer term. And just a little bit of detail there with regards to some of the actual specific projects that we see coming out in that next 12 months around, additional water supply and Tarawera to support growth out the east side and the stormwater, etc. So just to give you a little bit more detail there. But it's safe to say, again, it's that continuation of quite a significant capital works program underpinned predominantly by what we say is core business, looking after our infrastructure and our assets and growing in response to growth. Again, a little bit of a summary once again for you to see with regards to how that is broken down and how it has been funded. And you'll see in particular from our renewals, predominantly funded from rates with a little bit of external funding. That's mainly the NZTA subsidies that supports the renewals of our roading program. And then in our levels of service, fairly evenly, close to 50-50 split in those other two between borrowing and external fundings or development contributions. So that's how that significant program of work is funded. Debt, we anticipate debt to be consistent with the long-term plan. We see no deviation from that. The only material deviation that may occur is if we're not able to get through all of our capital works program this year, and some of that has to be deferred into the next financial year. That'll just be a timing of when that debt is drawn. But otherwise, we're seeing ourselves being consistent with the LTP and still on track with regards to the capital works over the next couple of years, driving our debt, and our debt is on the consistent trajectory of the LTP to peak in 2029 and still maintain that buffer below the self-imposed limit of 250%. And so with that, happy to pause there again, and what we'll seek from you next is guidance and direction with regards to some of the consultation topics that we're likely to have.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've asked this question, I think you've answered it. Just to remind me, the Rotorua Museum exhibition, that 3.3 million is in there because it has to be, even though we're going to source the money from elsewhere. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a question regarding the Sala Street Chapel. It is one of the more expensive capital projects at just over $1 million, $1,044,000. And only above that is pensioner housing, museum, and of course water supply and sewage, which is very important. I do wonder with that chapel whether there's an opportunity to look at any urgent, immediate works, and then further pause any more expensive structural upgrades that are required, just so that we can ensure that it is up to a sufficient level of service, but not yet undertaking the full or a full new redevelopment if possible.
Definitely, Your Worship. I think we've still got the placeholder in there from the LTP where it's 50-50 funded, and working on that joint venture. I think in due course in the coming months, Rob will have to give the council a bit of an update of how that's progressing, and if so, or how or not, with regards to what are some of those alternative treatments that we can do. And I'm sure Alex, in her new role, will be championing at the bit to have a look at that one.
Just checking if there are any further questions. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. you mentioned parking. That doesn't go into this annual plan, or do we signal something around parking review, or?
I might answer that in the absence of JP. So the term of the contract wouldn't be within this annual plan, this fiscal year. However, there are elements of the parking contract that we might be able to modify to shift out of externally contracted back in-house, or vice versa, depending on what was more cost effective. So there's some mechanisms under the contract that we could adjust in the last year. But those are at risk, and that's what is turning up in this fiscal year.
Right, and that's not a consultation thing, is it? Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Could I just ask on, and sorry, I know we've discussed this and it's probably coming up again at maybe, it's not a workshop, but in perhaps the CAD, is the pensioner housing. I know we've touched very gently at times about perhaps having to put the rents up, but can I just ask, have we done any more work on whether we could do that and whether government would step in with a housing subsidy? Because, as you know, personally I have reservations about us selling or any other, shall we say, construct. But at the moment, you know, as it's been brought up, I think it takes about $1 million plus, just over $1 million off on our books. So, you know, we're sort of people looking for life rafts and we're sort of running short. So I just wonder if there's perhaps some work on there coming up to us soon.
JP and the team are continuing to work on some options around that. We might recall the discussions that we had pre-Christmas. Once again, though, we haven't tried to reflect or anticipate what that could look like pending a decision of yours into the future in the plan. So we've left that with regards to the status quo funding. But then saying that as well, the team will be preparing themselves probably shortly to put a paper to you with regards to, it's been close to nearly a year since we put those rents up, and so just getting into that rhythm to constantly review and ask the question of whether the rents should change for them as well going forward.
There appear to be no further questions. So I just want to ask one more, and it's just in the Capital Works renewals, and just really questioning the Aquatic Centre renewals at $103,000, since we have very recently did a major brand new upgrade of the Aquatic Centre. Is that just setting aside money for future renewals?
There are a few legacy items that were out of scope as part of the refurbishment, so there's a need to maintain and look after those as well. But what we wanted to do as well was to ensure that when we've put a $30 million investment into a facility, that we did have the funding available should it be required to stay on top of maintenance going forward. And so historically we were, I think, looking at $400,000 a year of renewals, so it is at the lower amount, and as that facility and plant refresh ages, we'll see the level of renewals having to increase as well. But that's, the team feel that it's an appropriate level considering some of the things that weren't refurbished out of scope and the need to stay on top of all the new refurbished stuff going forward.
Okay, I understand that. But I will leave that with you to further consider. And just finally on the museum, again, there's museum renewals at $154,500, and also the museum off-site facility renewals. I appreciate the off-site facility does not necessarily look pretty. It's certainly not the best space for the staff to be working in, but I do just question, given that it is a temporary facility, again, whether we really need to be spending money on the off-site and then also money on renewals when we are currently undergoing a significant redevelopment project.
So the off-site is a permanent facility. It is the storage for a lot of the tonga, and even with the museum open, there's still quite a bit that's there. A lot of that money is around the mechanical services, around the air conditioning, the humidity, and and temperature control that's required. It is quite a substantial investment in the offsite, as well as looking after the building that houses it. And then with the museum as well, obviously, when it opens and all the mechanical services get turned on as well. We talked briefly in the previous meeting that a lot of the mechanical services were 10 years old at the time of closure, so therefore that they're not being replaced, so there is that need to have a certain level of renewal budget to look after that. But in saying that, Your Worship, I hear the question that's being posed, and so therefore we'll ask the organisation to ensure that those levels are appropriate, considering the work that's been done.
Thank you. Sorry, I am diving into a detail now, but the other large figure that jumps out is the library renewals at 772,000. Again, I'm presuming this is essential renewals. I believe in the past, I think there was the lift needed to be upgraded. But again, we just question.
So two of the lifts are being done this financial year. There is the third lift there, but also, again, when the library was done, the one element that wasn't done was the roof. So the existing roof stayed on, and I think that's one of the line items that's there around ensuring that that roof is near the end of its life and going for its renewal. So while the library nearly 10 years ago had quite a significant refurbishment, the existing roof wasn't touched and was left intact, and that's one of the line items that'll be driving that expense line.
Thank you. I would just encourage you to see what the asset life of that is, although we don't like to sweat our assets. Councils are well known to do so at times that we need to, so whether that could be delayed even one more financial year just to assist, but we will leave that with you to investigate. Thank you. And we'll take a question from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your indulgence. It just reminded me I had looked at these and glanced over it, and they just grabbed my eye again. IT renewals, digital customer enhancements, information solutions improvements. When you add all those three together, that's a substantial chunk of money. Is that all connected to our main system?
Oh, no, it's a combination. I think what we are is we want to transform ourselves to be a digital organisation where we engage with our community, not only with sharing information but progress, but actually being able to do business online. So that is really the funding that is targeted towards moving us up that pathway towards someone lodging a resource consent online, being able to monitor it online, being able to see all their interactions with council and do more and more business through their mobile devices and online versus maybe some of the older school manual processes that councils are known for. And so that's what that's targeting.
Right. So was this originally budgeted in the One Council plan, and we're just now seeing it roll out at these different times, different years?
Yep. So that was part of the original, I guess, profile of one was to get the base system changed out and embedded into that, and then to start turning on a lot of those opportunities with regards to our online portals and so forth. And I think one of the other challenges as well is that we have now is for the organisation is AI has kind of blown up in the last 12 months with regards to how can we leverage that online and looking at chatbots and more self-service and FAQs and really improving our digital presence online. Yep.
Right. So these three amounts, they were included in, I think it was the 17 million, so this is not new money, it's all part of that initial plan?
No, the 17 million referring to was past. This is all new going forward.
New money?
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
So just might also add, my understanding is the IT renewals, that includes, laptops, it's renewals of devices for the staff and all of that.
Yeah, if you've included the infrastructure renewals, that includes our services, our servers, our SANs, our backup power supplies, our switches, our everything, which is a substantial investment, laptops and all the rest, yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, we will carry on, thank you.
So, we've talked before about these are some of the three potential topics of consultation, and what we seek from you is now some feedback on those, and in particular around whether you are wanting to or not, particularly for Tarawera, and if so, what would a sort of preferred option in your view kind of look like. So we'll start off with the Tarawera sewage scheme. I guess a bit of context. I think we all know this, but the regional council, with regards to the offset rules back in the late 2010s, changing the rules around septic tanks, obviously targeting water quality and the challenges that the community faced. Our understanding is that looking at the site assessments of some of those properties and where they sit and underlying, 170 out of about 450 existing properties wouldn't be able to put in those supporting offset systems, and so therefore wouldn't have a compliant systems in place. And so over the decade really of the 2010s, 2013, 15 and all those LTPs, we've had multiple discussions with the community, and in the last 2021 consulted on and decided to proceed with a reticulation scheme. And the regional council indicated that once a reticulation scheme is available, that there'll be no further resource consents and approval given for septic tanks, and therefore the community will need to transition and connect to the scheme. I guess what we need is a question of you of we've come out of a long-term plan, and in that long-term plan we did consult on that community on the total cost of the scheme and how those costs fall. And what we've seen as the pipe has gone in and discussions have been had with property owners around connecting to that pipe, we're seeing some resistance that you're seeing yourselves with regards to asking the question around costs and funding. And one of the questions that you did ask us previously was around, are there some alternative funding options available? The challenge that we've got is that we did consult on our LTP on the current funding of that scheme, and so to change it therefore, and we'll go through some options that we have, we would be required to consult with the wider community on what those changes look like and what the impact would be and the rationale for it. And so we're going to seek your direction on that. Pre-Christmas, I think we talked to you about this as well on the 5th of December, around asking what we did with the Rotorua scheme. And so what we have done here is to say that of the total cost schemes, for $1 million, if it was to be moved from the direct beneficiaries to a wider ratepayer group, what are the methods that are currently available to us? And by currently available to us is what are some of our existing rates versus going and consulting on a new separate rate. And so we have in the past used the Lakes Enhancement rate and also the sewage rate. And so those two rate types have a different number of ratepayers. So the Lakes Enhancement rate is picked up by all ratepayers that fall within our district under the Bay of Plenty Regional Council boundaries. So therefore predominantly parts of Waikiki, Nakuru and Rotorua are not included in that catchment as they are part of the Waikato Regional Council. And the sewage targeted rate is applicable to all properties that are either connected or have the service in front of them and not connected. And so different number of ratepayers. $1 million impact on those has obviously a benefit of against the 450 existing and 100 targeted growth of $1,800 per property benefit by moving it away from the direct beneficiaries, and has the impact of, on the Lakes Enhancement rate, being $2.80 per property over 25 years. Sorry, this is over 25 years. And the sewage targeted rate would be $3.40 per property that is connected to that scheme. And you'll see therefore that the rates percentage would have the impact of roughly 0.1% impact on all those properties that fall within those rates catchment. Happy to take any questions right there.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, if I may. Thank you, Madam Chair. So just so I'm reading that correctly, for every $1 million, if that was spread over the 27,300 ratepayers over 25 years, it would be $2.80 per household unit, I guess you could say, for the next 25 years. So basically an extra 50, $60
Correct.
over 25 years.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To just clarify, it's not all three, it's any one of those.
Any one of those, yeah.
So we did talk about, I thought, about a $4 million additional subsidy. Where does that get us in terms of what the homeowners would pay?
Councillor Brown, I believe you did talk about a $4 million subsidy, and others might have used different numbers. We've just used it in terms of units of a million, so can multiply that out by 4 to get 4. What that does to the split in terms of private versus public cost, not sure if the team have that.
Yep, so under the current option, each property owner would pay a lump sum of about $43,000 each. By moving $4 million away from the direct beneficiaries to the other community, that would bring it down to just over $36,000 each, and would roughly be a 50-50 split between 50% picked up by the property owners and the other 50% by some external funding and the rest of the community.
Okay, thank you. I know the working group has been advocating for additional support from central government and regional council. Have we any indication on whether there's any success in that space?
I can speak to that, and others can add if they wish. So we've recapped some of the discussions we've had with both central government and regional council. Both have indicated there isn't any additional funding, any additional grants.
There's not, sorry?
There is not any
yep.
additional grants or any additional funding provided by either of those two entities. The regional council have, I believe, made you all aware of their decision to reduce their rate that are charged to Rotorua district ratepayers, and have encouraged the elected members around this table to use that as an opportunity to increase our rates in order to create a net neutral effect on the ratepayer. That's effectively a communications decision that this council needs to make, but they have already made the reduction in their rates. There was an action with me to get confirmation that they don't have an intent to bring that rate back, and I have that in confirmation from the Chief Executive that their finance plan for the next fiscal year is fixed and they don't intend to consult on that year's annual plan, and so it's the earliest when they could run a consultative procedure and then change their rating would be the 26-27 annual plan.
Okay. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, how the decision process is going to go, but as a start of a conversation, I would put forward that we consider consulting on $4 million using the lake enhancement rate as the mechanism for repayment, and if other councillors support that, then so I'm not sure where we go for that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We're certainly open to any and all feedback. This is the opportunity to do that and to share your ideas. And remember, we do also have the workshop on the 17th. So perhaps what we could do is bring that back with confirmation exactly, even though I'm pretty sure it's just ×4, for discussion for councillors then, and any other changes that may come. And from there, whatever the majority of councillors wish will then go to the council for approval, where it can be democratically voted on whether to support or not, if that process makes sense. Thank you for your feedback on that. I have Councillor Wadu and then Councillor O'Brien.
Tēnā koe te manakura. So, I suppose a question and a point of clarification as well, if that's okay. Maybe it's to you, Andrew. Say the lake enhancement rate or whatever goes, that's the pathway we take. Do you envisage any, I suppose, challenge from other communities that have already paid their dues without that support, i.e. Okareka, such? Would there be a valid challenge?
Through you, Worship, I don't want to speak for the views of other people, but in terms of consistent application of policy, it's a little bit difficult because the other lakes were all deed funded and therefore had greater external subsidies that were not borne by the other ratepayers either. Though.
So then that would be our position, that is the...
Well, I think that the things to reflect on are, for the property owners, they would see 50-50 as equity with the other property owners that have had to pay. For the other ratepayers, they're providing a greater subsidy for this community than they did for other schemes. So those are the two perspectives to consider.
Okay, thank you. And just a point of clarification, so I think Councillor Brown brought up the figure of, was it 4 million or something like that? And I know why he's got that figure. That seems to be the figure where people would bring it up to where people might be a bit more open and a bit more comfortable around paying. However, is that a simple sort of maths thing times 4?
It is a simple maths thing, times 4, but if you look at the last column, that's also 0.4% on effectively everyone's rates. So we just talked about 8.1.
For 25 years?
Every year for 25 years.
Every year for 25 years.
So for this...
That's what I want clarity on.
Yeah, for this annual plan, that would be, well, if it was 8.1, it would become 8.5.
Thank you for that clarification. Got it.
Thank you. And I do just want to note that all decisions that we make need to be considered collectively. So while it may be 0.1 or 0.4 at potential maximum, that's on top of everything else, and it all adds up very easily, very quickly. Yes. Yeah. Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Kofong.
Thank you, Te Manakura. And just to follow up on Councillor Brown's suggestion, because I've looked into that particular, what would you call it, proposal option myself. My concerns with it, there's about 3 or 4, but I'll just keep it brief if I can. Firstly, the $4 million, as I've pointed out, yes, they are reducing that particular fee, but the Kaituna one does raise. And if the Kaituna one goes up by approximately $2 million, and the same, roughly about the same amount of ratepayers suddenly are paying $2 million more, but just in a different line on there, is it still $4 million savings? Now, I would appreciate if we could perhaps find out, it's straight under the Lakes Enhancement, I think it's page 202 of volume 2 of the long-term plan, not showing off. But if that's costing $2 million straight away, there isn't $4 million there in savings for a start. Now, nothing against our cousins over at EBOP, but I am concerned when they say, well, sorry, we're not amending our LTP, but, you know, where's the money for the Rotorua wall coming from? Where's the money for the Ngātaha flood mitigation coming from? Where's the money for the class action suit, no matter how it goes out, etc.? I'm sure insurance is part of that, but, you know, there's a lot of questions there to be asked about how suitable. Now, I appreciate they've said that they're not going to amend. That's fine, okay. But goodness, there's some issues there. And secondly, much in all as I have a lot of sympathy for the people of Tarawera, what my concern with the working group is, the working group's solution is, well, everyone else got funding from central government and EBOP, we should pay up 50-50. But we didn't pay 50-50 on the other schemes. I feel terrible that Tarawera wasn't a deed lake. I don't really understand why, but, you know, to be fair to the council at that time, if the government put a $72 million cheque in front of me, hell yes, I would have grabbed it. So I don't quite understand why Tarawera, but maybe that's something where, now that I believe the strategy group is identifying Tarawera as a priority lake, maybe that's where we need to push forward and say between us, now I'd be more than happy to put in some form of increase as long as EBOT put in and as long as central government put in. And now that Tarawera has been identified by the, strategy group, is that the correct name? I think that there's something down that track. I appreciate the government's indicated, blah, 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 but, you know, previously a government turned around and said, you've got $10 million. Then the same minister turned around and said, no, you haven't. Now another government saying, yes, you have. So, I mean, governments change their minds. Funny enough, especially around election times, funnily enough. But I think that that's something where we should be, I'd be more than happy to look at putting a partial increase in there, so long as it's met by the other three, because we have never put in 50-50. And that's where my issues with the working group are, because they expect other ratepayers in Rotorua to meet 50-50, which we never did with the other ones. We contributed absolutely, but we never did 50-50. Again, I feel sympathy that they're not a deed lake, but that wasn't this council's fault. So I think a better solution for us is to try to reach out to our partners on TOLT, on Bay of Plenty Regional Council and the central government and say, hey, plus, I mean, for moving forward, Tarawera probably should be a priority lake if there are other issues down the track. So for me, that's probably something where we would look at. I'd be more than happy to, as Councillor Brown says, look at some form of increase, but it's only as part of a combined effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very helpful feedback, Councillor Brown. I think what would be most helpful is between now and the 17th, I will have a discussion with Chief Executive and Thomas on how we could potentially propose that, because if we are going to consult on it, we haven't had confirmation yet that the Regional Council or the government will. So I'm certainly happy to take that feedback on board and reach out to Government and Regional Council in the meantime to see if there is any opportunity, and we'll try our best to get a response on whether it would be likely or not before the workshop. So we'll take that feedback on board and try to get as much information as possible.
Your Worship, sorry to also be the less optimistic one today, but just to be clear, the multiple communications in writing with various government ministries and the Regional Council have thus far been quite clear that there isn't any. So I'm trying to understand how we structure the consultation when it's dependent on something we really don't have any idea about. But I'll work with the Mayor on that.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown, you had another comment?
Just clarification. So the 2 million be better off, is Councillor Brown suggesting it's 2 plus another 4, or is it 2 plus 2? Just getting that clarification. What are we suggesting?
2 plus 4, but perhaps get some clarity on what our position is on the 2.
Okay, so that's my question around that. The second one was just around the comms, because I know Councillor Patterson asked the question, yes, it's just $2.80, and I know people have said before it's just a cup of coffee or it's half a cup of coffee or whatever, but it's $2.80 plus $2.80 times 100 times all the other $2.80s for every other thing that we spend. So I think that if it's 4 million and it's actually, you know, it's 0.4% on the rates rise, so it goes from 8.1 to 8.5. I think that is a more realistic way of looking at it from a comms perspective than it's just $2.80. Yeah. So I just wondered about the comms on this, because whilst it's a Tarawera project, this has to be communicated to the rest of the ratepayers as well. So a clarification on the 2 million would be better off, just around the communication.
Thank you, Councillor Kaifong, and I wish to support those comments. I think ensuring that in the consultation part, it is very clear the total cost and total impact to the ratepayers, because certainly when it's 2 + 4, and you know that I was not supportive of the 2 moving in the first place, and straight away we would have had 3 hydro slides for our community at the Aquatic Centre, which no, 2 + 4 would have been within, we would have hydro slides at the Aquatic Centre, which is a public facility, and in this case which will be enjoyed by thousands of people every year, and in this case we're looking at giving that money, or it's being proposed to give that money entirely to 550 households for their private benefit on their private owned land for their private sewage that they are creating, which is currently harming the environment. So there will be strong views on this as we go forward to consultation, and I do agree that we need to make the overall impact very clear for the community. We'll go Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do kind of tautoko Deputy Kai Fong's comment there with regards to how we frame it. That lake, out of all the lakes in all of New Zealand, is probably the most important lake in the country. That is where tourism in this country started. So for over 100 years, the people of New Zealand have enjoyed the benefits, and international visitors have enjoyed the benefits of that lake. It's an investment in the jewel of the crown of this area. Rotorua is another lake entirely that has the history, that has the stories, but Tarawera is a different one. If you did a search on Google as to which lake has got the most photographs, I guarantee you it'll be Tarawera. It's used in much of our marketing at Rotorua NZ for how we portray Rotorua as clean and green and surrounded by trees and forest and the beautiful mountain and the whole story of the mountain. It's all very, very emotive stuff, and that's something that has a value. So while I agree it would be nice to have the wonderful aquatic centre upgraded and running at full capacity, we have this lake that we need to protect for future generations and remember where it all started. So I kind of disagree that we'd be spending money on something that nobody else gets a benefit from, because our entire community should be proud of that lake as their asset, and the whole purpose of the sewage treatment system, the reticulation system, was to protect it. That was the argument initially put to this community, that we are protecting the future of that lake. Am I not correct? Yes? So that's the price. If we want to protect this lake for the future, it's not just on those people who live there, it's on all of us should be investing in protecting that lake. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Not only does Councillor Patterson disagree with your analysis and comparison with the Aquatic Centre, I think maybe Helen Clark does as well. I've been the recipient. I've been the recipient, as many other elected members have, of a number of emails and Lagoima requests that Tracy McLeod has made. We've attended a meeting with the working group on Auckland Anniversary Day. Several of us attended a meeting hosted by Tracy and Fred on the following Saturday, and trying to make sense of what she's concerned about and what many of the residents at Tarawera are concerned about. We've been scratching our head to go back to how we got to where we are today. And Tracy brought our attention to Helen Clark's speech, which I referred to at the first meeting I just referred to. She said, the local community has signalled its willingness to make major contributions to the cost of the restoration of the lakes. Yet a project of this scale is clearly beyond the ability of the councils alone to fund without excessive burden on the ratepayers. Key phrase, excessive burden on the ratepayers. Nor should they be expected to do so when these lakes in our nation's tourism heartland matter to us all. And that's the Prime Minister speaking from Wellington, not just Rotorua perspective. So Helen Clark had come here today to announce that our government will be a major funding partner to restore the lakes. They'd committed $72 million over 10 years, and that's to be 50% of the total cost. The other 50% of the cost will be funded by the residents at Tarawera, the residents at Rotoiti, the residents around Lake Rotorua, Rotomā. That's not what it says. The other 50% of the cost will be funded by the Rotorua District Council and Environment Bay of Plenty, both of which have committed to this funding in their long-term community consultation plans. So I asked Councillor Winters at the meeting what changed, because this was the original arrangement. It seems, as far as the information that Tracy has provided us with, that the residents of Okaraka and the residents of all of those other lakes have actually contributed to their reticulation schemes when it wasn't there, when they weren't expected to do so under the terms of the original trust deed. So I'm wondering, and this is a question asked, I suppose, on behalf of Tracy, have the reticulation schemes that we have done been in breach of the terms of the original funding agreement? Should not the regional council have contributed their 25% towards the scheme? Should not our council have contributed 25% towards the cost of these schemes?
That's probably a bit of a political question, so...
I'll just say that we have responded to the ratepayer you referred to in full in our Lagoima requests, and so have the regional council.
And what's the answer? Because I think there's a few interested people around this table.
All
And,
Lagoimas are made available on the website, if people wish to.
Can we have a quick summary, please, Andrew?
No, it's not appropriate right now. We're going a bit off track. But I would also say that you have quoted other people. You have mentioned Kevin Winters. We don't have any control over their promises or over their delivery, but the council certainly has the ability to advocate strongly for our communities, which we will continue to do so. As we've heard today, there have been a number of communications requesting, seeking further funding, further assistance. Those have not come to fruition, but based on Councillor O'Brien's suggestion, I'm happy to try one more time before we start to finalise this annual plan. I am mindful of time, so I'll take one more point from Councillor O'Brien, and then we also have the Local Waters Done Well and Airport Business Park.
Sorry, one quick question. Thank you, Te Manu. Thank you for your leniency. Could I just confirm my memory from the 5th of December, Thomas? If, for example, could we just take a $4 million figure, that Councillor Brown, we borrow that and then we pay it back, don't we? If we borrowed the $4 million?
We
is
borrow
that
it
right?
regardless, but a different set of ratepayers pays it back, yes.
So if we did that, that would have an effect on our debts?
No,
No?
we still plan to borrow it,
Exactly.
but what we're saying is over the next 25 years, we're planning on 550 property owners to pay for it, and instead 27,000 will pay for it. So
Okay.
it doesn't change our debt profile.
Great, thank you very much.
So just to help us go forward, and the next slide was just going to talk about some implementation. What I'm hearing from you is we would like us to do some modelling for you to consider around leveraging the lakes enhancement rate, and there was an amount bandied around, so that is what we will work towards. I think
We'll do some options.
yeah, with some options, and for us, I think one of the things that we have to be very clear about in our consultation, that should the council wish to go ahead and do this, is the rationale around moving costs away from direct beneficiaries to the wider public, and how we kind of represent that. So we will do some modelling on that front. The next bit is Just a reminder again of the proposed methodology that we talked about as well. There seemed to have been some good support for that, but just kind of seeing if we can reinforce that, because this is something that will underpin not only in this communication around the draft annual plan, but also in others. So, so any change in funding will go towards obviously the benefit of the property owners, and that is just recognising therefore that there is no other external funding at the moment, and we are looking to target those that have agreed to sign up to locality plans. And so this is the $2 million that has been changed with regards to the Better Off funding. What we're proposing to do is say give the team, our team, a period of time to work through that whole community and targeting a 1 June to consult on to get them to sign up to the capital funding plan, to get agreement that where we can install and go ahead with the properties on those. And for those that do therefore sign up, will receive the benefit of sharing into that $2 million Better Off funding, which will therefore reduce their property owners' cost of that scheme back down to them. For those that chose not to signal and sign up to the scheme by 1 June, and when we go through and connect into the future, that if they are required, which they likely will be because of the change in regional council rules and the fact that they won't get a resource consent for a septic tank going forward, that the cost of installation will therefore fall directly on them, and they will have to pay the direct connection cost as it falls due.
So just to be clear, that would then be without any subsidies any additional subsidies that this council provides to those who do sign up within this annual plan.
Which therefore means that, subject to what we talked about before, if you decide to do something and move costs onto a different set of ratepayers, those property owners wouldn't benefit from that, because they'll, by not agreeing to sign up, they'll be electing to bear the full cost of their connection costs going forward. There we go. Any feedback on this?
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Number 4 on the list there, properties without reticulation and who do not have an OSET compliance system will be required to apply for a resource consent. So properties with who do have an OSET compliance system, where do they sit?
I think Stavros can probably answer that.
Just to remind everyone, properties who have a septic tank on their properties at the moment, they do so in contravention with the maintenance of the Planned Regional Council. The septic tanks cannot continue to function. So properties only got 2 options. One, to connect to a reticulation system, which we are implementing, or to apply to install an OSET aerated wastewater treatment system that removes nutrients. In order to do that, they need to apply to a regional council for resource consent, which is a discretionary activity, and the regional council, before they will not give them a permission for that, a consent for that, and obviously we, as operator of a reticulation system, will have a say whether we agree to that or not. So the option of people maintaining the current septic tanks is not available to anyone.
Yes, but do I understand correctly that there's plenty of residents at Tarawera who do have an OSET compliance system and don't have a septic tank?
No, there are about 21 properties that have got a current consent for an OSET system, AWTS. The term of their consent varies from another 1 or 2 years to another 4 or 5 years. So those consents will not be renewed in the presence of the regulations.
I have another question, but I'll just pause for a moment if I may.
Sure. Is there any other questions in the meantime? We'll go to Councillor Brown. Just my deepest apologies. I do need to just greet some a Japanese delegation. I expect to return in 15 minutes though, and Sandra will chair from here. We'll go to Councillor Brown, then return to Councillor Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just need some clarity on number 3. So they don't sign the locality plan or agreement. We're going to charge them $15,000 regardless. Will not offer...
Approximately. The exact dollars will be based on the
Yeah.
cost of the scheme.
So we're not going to offer on-site installations. That will be up to them. Yep. But we won't reticulate. We won't connect a system that they install. Is that what we're saying? So we're going to charge them 15, but we're not going to...
No, they'll be required to install our approved systems through an approved contractor onto our network,
But they'll pay for it.
and they'll pay for the whole cost of it
But
upfront.
then they'll still be able to connect it to the pipes.
It will be connected to the main trunk line, yes.
So I think that last sentence is a little bit ambiguous.
We'll clarify.
Okay, Councillor O'Brien then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I just clarify, sorry, whoever wants to answer, the locality plan, is that the same as signing up for the scheme and the building consent? Or is the locality plan just allowing DDL to scope out the sign? Sorry, it's just a question from the working group that I know they were.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, the locality plan is the acceptance and a confirmation by the property owner that the location, can you hear me? Sorry. The location of the grinded pump is agreed by them. It's a necessary requirement for us to obtain the building consent. Without the property owner signing that I'm happy where the pump is going to go, we cannot apply for a building consent. Without signing up the locality plan application, the building consent cannot be made, and without a building consent, we cannot install a grinded pump.
Any further questions then on Tarawera? Otherwise, we'll just Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Section 459 of the Local Government Act 1974, is the council relying on that at the present time for any of this arrangements?
The section 459, I believe, is the one that requires a property to install a drainage system and connect to a ventilation system.
Right, because I've got section 459 up here on...
Well, can I suggest at this point in time, I think if we want to go into legal details, Councillor Bahawali, I think, I'm not sure if it's the right environment here to do it.
Well, it's just that it says that council can require people to connect a drain to a water course or to the sea. So I don't suppose that would apply to a sewage system.
Provide you the legal framework for that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very
And
much.
I think I'd just say that, yeah, again, the question where is really about the proposed methodology for applying any additional subsidies. We're not really asking about what we do for people who don't sign up to that scheme.
Okay, so I think just about drawing this to a close. So there was just feedback on the first part, which was around the 8.1. Secondly, I think there was some suggestion it's 4 mil from the Lakes Enhancement rate. Question. Sorry.
The Lakes Enhancement. Sorry, our one, or the regional council?
Our one. Yeah. Question around staff costs. So I don't know, is there any feedback around the first part of the presentation on the 8.1? Okay, so we'll just quickly go around the room for some kind of direction. Councillor Brown?
Start in my corner, I guess. I've said this a number of times, 7.9 is a whole lot better than 8.1.
Okay, Councillor Wadu?
Kia ora, e te teo mana hou. Yes, Councillor Brown's right, it does look better. That's why everything is always $9.95 or $7.88. It's a my thing. Hoi ono, tēnā. I just want to sort of make comment around, just commend our kaimahi, our staff, because some of the comments I've heard over the course of this hui, I believe it's a bit hard, and that's probably that's us too. It's hard when we keep moving the goalpost. Last year we spoke about this at some length, and we got to a point where this is what we're going to do, and then I've heard a bit of kōrero, things have changed now and things like that. Well, they haven't changed all that much. I know the government has said we need to, stop putting so much pressure on our ratepayers, and yet they don't support us to do so. They're not cutting back on the taxes and the GST. So it's a little bit hard, I think, and I just want to impress that upon my colleagues. Just we talked about this stuff last year too, and I thought we landed on in a good spot. Of course, we want to go down in rates. Of course, I do, but there are some decisions we're going to have to make, and then we agreed we would do things where we wouldn't have to go out and do a whole lot of consultation. Now I'm hearing, we're going to be rehashing some things again, which is going to take longer, more pressure, more kōrero, more research, more work, which, okay, that's what we're here to do. However, I just want to urge my colleagues here to yes, we want to do the best, but also I think to be fair on our kaimahi, we know we need to actually put the post in the ground and say, "Anei, this is where we're going. This is what we'd like to see." And I think we're doing that, but we've done that in our TP stuff. I thought that was a pretty solid foundation for us to base this kaupapa we're talking about today on. So I'll leave it at that, and kia kaha tātou, and let's put the thinking caps on and be supportive of things moving forward. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Wadu. Anyone else want to make a comment? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I take on board what Councillor Waru says, but can I just say, when you walk around our CBD, which I do quite often, you take out the massage shops, the nail and beauty shops, the vaping shops, and the new barber shops. I tell you what, we've got a pretty empty looking CBD, and I don't know that it's going to be much better by the end of this year. The recession's hit, it's hitting hard, unemployment's going up, and I take on board what Councillor Waru says about all the hard work that our team have done, and it's going to get harder, unfortunately, but things have changed. It is much harder out there, and if we're not seen as responding to that, frankly, I don't think you're fit to sit around this table. So while I take on board what Councillor Waru said, it's good stuff and wise stuff, we have to respond to the changing times. Things are much harder. I don't know how long it'll last, but we've got to do something, and we've got to be seen to be doing something, because I think people would lose a lot of respect and confidence, which they've gained in this council. We'd be close to throwing that away, and I don't want to see that after all our hard work. So thank you.
Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A kind of tautoko Councillor O'Brien's feelings. As you know, by my track record, I've never been happy with any rate rise. I fought vigorously at the first annual plan to keep it at 8.1, I believe it was. However, seeing the facts presented to us and the risks that are being presented to us, 8.1 actually sounds to me like a pipe dream. We will probably end up being higher because of the things that are the pressures on us. And I'm horrified to think that 9.8 was ever even a realistic target. we're going to have to do some seriously hard calls to get it to 8.1 and below. And I take one of those calls that Councillor Brown raised, that in the initial annual plan, the plan put to us was a 3% staff, wasn't 0. And we ended up going to 5. Now, 3% in this time, when everybody is feeling the pinch, and I doubt there'll be many businesses giving many people much higher than that in the real world, that could be something that we could look at just for 1 year, get us through. What did they say? It used to be survive till 25. I think it's going to be survive 25. It's not getting better. So whatever we can do, I support the staff and their efforts to find those savings. And we as responsible councillors and governors of the city need to think about those who are really close to falling over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I had a question for Councillor O'Brien. What's your number?
It's a very hard question at the moment to answer. I think I sort of need to look at some of the answers that we're still to get at the next workshops. But for me, it's sort of a 5 or a 6. To answer your question, but I'm sorry, until we see the Free Waters thing, but thank you.
I think maybe if we just get indications if you're kind of comfortable around an 8.1 or whether you want to see it higher or lower. So any final comments from the councillors that haven't spoken? So Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Barker and Councillor Lee, do you want to make a comment? Councillor Maxwell?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've listened intently to everything here. Earlier on, I heard where they looked at Infracore and found some savings. I didn't think we would after listening the last time we had a workshop. Year 2 started off at 9.8. They've brought it down, it's been brought down to 8.1. I don't know, in fairness, how much more we can squeeze the CEO and the staff lower than that. We'd love that, that's a lovely desire. But even with all the projects and everything we got, and some have been saying it's going to be a struggle for even at 8.1, but in fairness to the CEO and the staff, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Any last comments? Councillor Barker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to support some of those comments that have made about the work that's been done. I also would like to reflect on what you've said, Councillor Kai Fong, around efforts to make as many cost savings as we possibly can, because that 8.1 number, if we make some other subsequent decisions, is going to go up. So I'll be trying to push for anything that took us in a direction that allowed us a bit more flexibility to make some other decisions that may need to be made, or if there's any need to go and support sewage schemes and those kinds of things. So I don't want to give a number, but I would like to encourage any of those cost-saving measures that Councillor Patterson has mentioned, plus others, if we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Acting Madam Chair. We talk about an 8% rates increase. Well, okay, if you're paying $5,000 in rates, we're talking about putting $400 on that. Spare a thought for the Tarawera residents who are staring down the barrel of a $50,000 rates bill. I mean, it was the previous council under the previous mayor that made a decision to go ahead with that reticulation scheme without getting funding, without deed funding, without seeking a variation on getting deed funding. I'm in favour of as low a rates rise as possible, and I have asked to that cause that we can go line by line through the biggest budget items, the Sports and Recreation Committee. That's what our Prime Minister said that prudent councils ought to be doing. But though I've asked for that several times, the answer seems to be no. I've asked for more information on how the depreciation works, so that for the purpose of renewals, that information hasn't been forthcoming. So there seem to me to be some stones yet unturned, perhaps stones that some don't want overturned, I don't know. But yeah, less is more, and the lower we can get, obviously, the better. But I still have some question marks over those reticulation schemes, which are a real concern.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other comments anyone wants to make in relation to Tarawera? Otherwise, staff will come back with options, is that right? Based on a suggestion of shifting 4 mil?
We actually have more slides, so.
Okay, so,
So,
sorry, are we going to still do those other, sorry, my laptop's died. I've run out of power.
I do love the enthusiasm. Your Deputy Worship.
Sorry, Thomas, I was
So-
trying to
so
bring
the
it to a close in my end.
The signal we'll take here is, first of all, it's pleasing to know that there's no residential property in Rotorua that pays $50,000 a year in rates. So just, councillor, that's a little bit off what any residential ratepayer pays. Not aware of any. That we're coming forward to the next workshop, that there's some support, some reluctance around the 8.1, maybe asking us the question of to do a bit more, and particularly around some of the efficiency things. We're going to come back and flesh that out in a bit more detail and give some more confidence, but it's there or thereabouts. On Tarawera, that you're open to considering proposals. While there's not agreement on what that would look like, we will put a couple of options available for you to consider, leveraging the Lakes Enhancement Rate and fleshing this out and tying it, those two together with regards to consultation to that community. So that's how, on behalf of staff, we've understood the discussion so far, so that gives us some good direction.
Okay. I think, were there 2 more slides, did you say?
Yep.
Oh, we've still got that.
We've got 2 more topics. The airport we won't discuss much, but it is worth at least you getting a heads up on local water done well. So if we could take a few more minutes of your time.
So in essence, therefore, there'll be so far one consultation topic, which is the Tarawera funding, with an overarching information summary of what makes up the annual plan and what's being delivered and so forth. Second consultation topic will likely be, and that's the need for us to get approval from the DIA by September, and the DIA require us to consult with our community on the Waters Done Well, is the current plan that the team are working on, and getting your endorsement when that's available will be around the 3 options that are available. So that's to retain the business in-house of the 3 waters. And that has some implications as well with regards to additional potential regulatory pressures that the government will put on us and also on the other entities. Option 2 will be a council-owned, 100% council-owned subsidiary, so it is a lift and shift from council into a 100% owned subsidiary with its own mechanisms and support functions. And option 3 will be a multi-council-owned water organisation. The consultation itself will be on a wider discussion around the multi, and that's the work that the Chief Executive has been doing with the Bay of Plenty mayors and chief executives as well, and with regards to optionality of whether councils want to join and participate in that. And from that, we will also go out with a preferred option, subject to your decision going forward. Happy for the Chief Executive to fill in any gaps here.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a long day, so I'll try and keep this succinct. We will do a workshop on this specifically in due course. Actually, not very far away, but it's important that what you will be adopting is a decision on which are the topics to consult on, which are the options to consult on, and which we name as the preferred option to our to our ratepayers. I just point out that for the ease of communication, we're proposing that we do this consultation together with the annual plan, although they're actually governed by separate pieces of legislation. So the consultation requirements are somewhat different, but it's proposed that we just do it together with the community as a single community conversation. So sometimes we'll talk about them together, sometimes we'll talk about them separately because the legislation that governs them is different. The next step after that is you will deliberate on this. It doesn't have to be tied up with the annual plan, and then have that passed to the minister by the 2nd of September and for the minister's approval. So again, this is just a heads up that this is coming. Again, keen to understand how, maybe I'll speak with the mayor and other chairs and work out what's the best way to package this up, because a lot of that is quite technical. There's a lot of material coming. So think about how that's done.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome back. Just a question on the process. September, we're supposed to have a decision to central government, is that correct?
Not a decision, but the plan. So the
Plan.
completed plan, approved, consulted on with the public, approved by council, signed off by the chief executive, needs to be with the minister by the 2nd of September.
So that's a fairly major decision. August, aren't we supposed to be in caretaker status?
Yes, so you will likely be completing your water services delivery plan approvals together with the annual plan. June.
Right, so we'd make that decision before. Yeah, okay, thank you. The other question comes back to our debt level. Just, I know we haven't discussed how that would work with these three options here, but if we moved away from an internal business unit, am I correct in understanding that debt would then move somewhere else, and potentially that could make a big difference to the graph that you've given us today?
Yep, so option 1 would have no impact. Option 2 would see the debt associated with those assets and services transition across, which would have the benefit of actually providing what's left of council more borrowing capacity to respond to community needs and outcomes. Yep. And the CCO potentially being able to, if required, leverage and borrow more. And option 3 is exactly the same impact as option 2.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Patterson's point there, though, moving that debt to a CCO, we're still responsible for it ultimately.
Absolutely. Can we cover all of that when we get to that workshop? Because these are the tools that this government has designed and allowed into this new act that creates a special class of water CCOs that have longer term borrowing capacities and higher debt headroom in order to smooth the impact on ratepayers.
Okay, we'll wait to hear that. So I did have a question. You're in discussions with the CEOs in the Bay of Plenty. Is that about joining with those, or should we be thinking about South Waikato in this? What do those discussions look like?
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So those discussions are about getting as many councils to leave open the option of a multi-council CCO, so that once we hear back from the public, each council can take on board the feedback from the conversation and then make a decision based on whatever the geographical groupings are appropriate. So I would recommend against the discussion being hijacked by who exactly is in your party, because there's a whole lot of options that might arise. They might include some councils that are not in the Bay of Plenty. They might include a subset of councils that are in the Bay of Plenty, and it might include all of the Bay of Plenty. So those are those conversations that we'll outline some scenarios before we go out for consultation, and when we go out for consultation, we'll publish a range of the likely cost impact of those different scenarios, but the ultimate decision will be after the consultation. And the discussions with the Bay of Plenty is just about everyone leaving an open mind and an open conversation with the community, so that when we come back to a deliberation, you don't have pockets that haven't had that conversation.
And then, of course, for our community, having the opportunity to do this consultation at the same time as the annual plan, so they're not feeling any consultation fatigue through it, because it is a big piece of work. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Could I just ask, and sorry, I know this is a small thing, but as far as option 2 and 3 moving forward, could we refer to it as a council-owned organisation? Because from our previous discussions, if it's a standalone entity from what we've previously asked, we don't actually have a lot of control over it. So how do we sort of, I'm just careful that we don't mislead the public into thinking, oh, it's just like Infocor, you guys can just change whatever you want and blah, blah, blah. But
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. That's a really good point. This is a special class. Actually, it's not even like Infocor or like any of our other CCOs. It's a special class of council. They are called council-controlled organisations, but they're called water services council-controlled organisations, and they have their own rules that are associated with them. So absolutely right. We need to be consistent on our terminology.
just a suggestion.
And indicate what that means. Quite right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and probably the last one is around an airport business park. Now, we don't think that the airport will be in a position to to consult wider. I think there's some more work and particularly some discussions around the local iwi out there around what's being proposed and to be considered. And so I guess it's a placeholder that should once those discussions have been completed and they are in a position, then it could be a topic of discussion and consultation, which will help you with any future decision around supporting the airport and their pathway. But at this stage, we're not too sure whether that will hit or not. And so I guess what we've now got from you is a pretty good direction for the next workshop around the proposed draft rates increase, fleshing out a Tarawera. And I think it's safe to say that the Water's Done Well will not be part of that annual plan workshop. It'll be a much separate workshop and a lot more depth. But we are targeting to do the consultation together as part of the annual plan, so we don't ensure we get consultation fatigue with our community.
Thank you. So we will open up to see if there are any final general comments that people wish to make before we close this up. And just a reminder, those final comments or any changes to the direction we will bring back on the 17th. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you for your leniency, Te Manakura. Could I just reflect back just for one quick second on the Three Waters? Will there be advice, during our annual workshop or whatever it is, however we do it, on our obligations on how iwi and hapu are represented in each of the options?
Yes, that will be part of the picture we bring you.
Thank you. I'll leave that alone today because, thank you.
I think there has been plenty of discussion, but I do also want to include, before any other councillors, if you do decide to have further input, there is certainly a strong desire from elected members and myself to still push to see if we can get a lower number on this. I appreciate that we would now be pushing into the boundaries of needing to consult if we are significantly changing our operations or certainly our levels of service to the community. But we do appreciate that it is still a hard time for many in our community, especially those that we don't always hear from through these consultation processes. So I do just leave that direction certainly, and also remind the councillors that anything in addition that we are adding on does add up, and it certainly adds up over time. It makes a big difference to those who are already struggling to get by week, but we also want to make sure that we are delivering things that matter to the community and providing value for the rates that they do pay. So we do want to see positive things coming up in this next year. I'm very proud that we are investing in infrastructure, but I do think we could be doing some of the investment a lot smarter as well. Any final comments from anyone else? Councillor Brown.
Just would like to add we've talked about communications, and I don't want to take away anything from anything anybody said here today, but if the LTP target, well, rates was 9.8, and we do achieve 8.1, that's circa 20% reduction in what was in the LTP. And I think if you communicate that clearly in the work that goes into that, a 20% reduction on is a good saving. So I think there's an opportunity, and I think there's a fear that there's some political risk to having a high rate, but I think 8.1 is not something that will get people voted out for, in my opinion. I'm a new politician. I don't see everything. I'm not the oracle, but we've got a good, strong team here. I think generally the community's happy with what we've got, and if you can get a 20% reduction in rates on what was previously forecast, I think that's potentially a good thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown, and you are correct, we have reduced it already significantly from where it originally was. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura nau mai hoki mai. Just touching on what Councillor Brown just said, actually. You know, when you look at it from that perspective, we've actually done pretty good. Our staff have done pretty good to get to the point where we are now. And of course, we're going to always want, go on, push it a bit harder, push it a bit harder. And we should. That's right. We should be doing that. And trying our best for the community. It's what we're sort of here to do. However, you know, there are some things, and I think Councillor Patterson made the comment, and perhaps Councillor O'Brien as well. We're going to have to make some, if we want to go down that track, we're going to have to make some real hard decisions and stick by them. You know, we can't this week go, oh yeah, well, we'll cut this service a bit, and then the next week we go, oh no, actually, no, we can't. I think Deputy Mayor Kai Fong made the comment, you know, it's really going to be at that levels of service is where that's the only place I can really see that kind of stuff being done. But of course, that comes with its consequences. It's utu. There's a utu to every action or every decision we make. And so I just hope, and I want to encourage staff and back up what Deputy Mayor Kai Fong said, just if we could dive in just a little bit more into those places where we can, where we might be able to get away with a bit more, with some more savings, that would be great. But in the end of the day, it's up to us. Going to be some hard ones, but I think let's not drag it out. Let's make and respond for the time. Ka tika, yeah. But you know, CBD, there and I'll just respond to Councillor O'Brien's call around. You know, it's a bit empty at the moment, but that's not just due to rates. That's a myriad of things there. You know, I know most of the landlords and most of the businesses in town there. There's a whole lot of reasons why that's happened. And it's just, you know, we're trying to find a way to help those people there, our residents, our business community, all sorts. But it's going to take more than just us, but, you know, we can play our part the best we can. So, taku aki aki tēnei ki ngākai mahi kia kaha. I hope you find somewhere where we can make some more savings, and also kia kaha tātou, ngā kai kaunihera, councillors. Let's make some decisions and stick by them. And to our CEO, kia kaha, thank you for getting to where we've got to. But again, you know, mahi never stops. Kia kaha, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Can I just thank you for that? And I I know we're going to wrap up soon. I just want to say, really happy to have, and I'd say this when I was in business all the time, is really happy to talk about the price. Let's also talk about the product, because if you want a lower price, you're going to get a lower product. And it seems like we're okay to have that conversation, so we'll pick that up again at the next workshop. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We have one final slide which just shows the timeline, but as you would have heard, we will see you again on February the 17th before a final decision on what we go out for consultation in March. Councillor Waru, I might call on you to do our closing karakia if you don't mind. Thank you. And can I just thank staff for the work that they've done? We have been on summer break and they've managed to pull together as much as they can during the limited working days that we've had since we've been back. So do acknowledge staff. Thank you.
Tēnā anō tātou katoa, kia inoi tātou. He honore, he korore ki te atua, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa āmini. Hanga mai rai e te atua he ngā kouhou ki roto ki tēnā o mātou ari i tia mana ki tia mai mātou ro tia mātou mahi katoa. E pai hoa tēnei mātou au pononga tuku whakawhetai atu ni ki a koe i tēnei rā. O mai rā te maharamatanga, me ngā mea katoa te aroha o te ngākau, kia pai ai tātou para whakamua, ki te whakatutuki i ngā mahi nui kai mua i te aroaro, mo te taone nui nei, mo te kāinga nei o Rotorua. E nei mātou e tuku whakawhetai atu ana ki a koe e ihua, koe hoki tō mātou kai whakaora, āmine.
Thank you, everyone. I declare the workshop closed.